All right, Infinity Part 3 or Part 4. I think Part 3. I 3D printed the little cage wire guide thingamabob, and it came out pretty good. It only weighs a few grams. It's pretty strong. It clips onto the motor, and it has another little piece here which I may or may not use. Since I don't have three hands, I'm going to stop recording, and then I'll clip this on and show you guys how it looks. Alright, so here it is on the motor. You can see there's a hole here for the wires to come out, and basically they'll just sit across the top like that. The motor spins absolutely freely in here. There's this back piece here, which should protect anything from getting into the motor this way. It's pretty stiff. It'll take a lot of force for something to jam that against the motor. So I'm really happy with that. I put a bunch of slots in here for cooling, as you can see. And then I have this little guy, which the plan was I was going to glue this on the bottom side of the motor like this, and that would basically retain everything, make sure that this thing would never come off. But it's on pretty secure, so I don't even know if that's needed. I mean, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So, I don't know. I'll think about that and we'll see. So there's that. That's done. This is the speed control that I'm going to use. Or actually, I'm just going to try and see how it works. This is a new 35 amp speed control from Graupner. 35 Ultra Control. I picked this because it's a lot smaller and a little bit lighter and more compact than the Castle Talon 35. And I've actually been having problems with Castle stuff with my JR equipment. It's been doing some funny stuff, like if I plug in my plane, I have to make sure all the servos are moving, all the surfaces are moving, because every once in a while I'll plug it in and one of the servos won't be moving, and I'll have to unplug and plug back in and make sure everything works. And it only seems to happen with the combination of JR, DMSS, and Castle products. So I don't know. We'll give this a shot. Anyway, it's a lot smaller than the Talon, so I like that. It comes with an XT60, but I think I'm going to use XT30s because I plan on running this battery. This is a Hyperion graphene battery. It's rated for 90C or 90C max. I used these all last year in F5J with great results. I really like these batteries. This is actually a 2S, so I'm going to try a 2S setup in this plane. I'll be running leads directly off this main power wire here to my receiver, so I won't be using the BEC in here, and I won't be using a separate external BEC. This speed control, the only downside that I saw was that it's only like a 3 amp BEC or BEC in here. So really it's not usable if you always use the internal BEC on the speed control. I wouldn't recommend this. If you're using an external BEC or a 2S setup, then you might want to give this a shot. But like I said, I'm just experimenting with this. I don't know if it'll be any good. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. I might end up putting a Castle back in here or something else. But yeah, so 2S battery, and I'm gonna experiment with props. Probably gonna end up using something like a 12.5 or a 12.6 or maybe a 13.5. Should give me about 900 to 1,000 grams of thrust. And hopefully this plane will weigh about 1,100 to 1,200 grams. So it's not going to be a rocket ship, but this is a very light plane. It's going to be my light model, so I don't need something that's going to get to 100 meters in 5 seconds or whatever. I just need something that'll get it up and do the job, because This plane will basically only be flown in moderate and dead air conditions. And if the wind comes up, I'll switch to one of my heavier models. So yeah, so the next thing to do is I'm going to trim up these leads here and solder on some bolt connectors. And we'll connect this to the motor. And I'm going to trim up some of this wiring because this is way too much. And I got to figure out something with this connector. I got to put XT30 on here. And I might have to make these wires longer because basically I have to route the wires from here. The speed control will probably be around here. I have to route the wires all the way from here to over here. So these wires aren't going to cut it. Well, I've skipped ahead a little bit. I basically got the plane done. Couldn't use that Graupner speed control. In the end, I was just having some problems with the programming. I think that was more suited for multirotors. I had to put a Talon 35 in this to get everything working. And it's a little bit heavier than the Graupner, but that doesn't really matter in the end because I'm actually slightly tail heavy in my build. But I'll just give you the layout of the cockpit area here. I have XT30 connector mounted in this 3D printed bracket, and that's bolted into the servo tray. So I can unscrew this and pull the connector out if I need to. Servos, I have my Altus here mounted on a 3D printed mount, and the wires run back down next to the servos and to the receiver. I have a Graupner 8-channel receiver in there, as you can see. I did something cool with this 3D printed mount. It also has channels for the antennas, and I inserted some Robart airline tubing in those channels and then put the antennas through that. So they're well supported and protected. Talon 35, I got the Riva baby motor, Vlad hyperspinner, 30mm hyperspinner, and I have a Vita 12.7 prop. Really wanted to use a 13.5. I think that would have been the best prop for this, but I didn't have any, couldn't find any, so we'll give this 12.7 a shot. Originally had intended to use a FR Sky radio, an X10, because I'm looking to get away from my JR stuff, but I don't know, I didn't like the quality of the FR Sky hardware, and I didn't want to spend a few weeks learning OpenTX, so I ended up trading my buddy that X10 for this MZ24 Pro, which I think was a good trade. This took a little bit of getting used to, a day or two of fiddling around with the programming to figure out how it works, but in the end it does everything I need for F5J. I don't know about F3J. I think it's missing a few flight modes for me for F3J, but there's an MZ32 coming out, so maybe that'll be a better radio. But yeah, so she's basically ready to fly. The next thing I'm going to do is just test the motor settings out on a watt meter and see how many watts and amps it's pulling. That way I can get a gauge of how this prop is working and if I have any room to run a bigger prop or if I have to go to a smaller prop or whatever. But it's very light. It's 41.5 ounces as it sits, ready to fly with a battery. I'm using a 900 milliamp 2S pack, taking power directly off the 2S pack for the receiver. As I said, I'm slightly tail heavy, so I may end up getting a 1200 2S pack to put in here. Yeah, I'll see how much weight it takes to get the CG closer to the specified range. Right now the CG is 127 millimeters from the leading edge, and I think 120 would be a better setting, but it'll probably fly like this, so I might give it a shot. Yeah, so there you go. Infinity's all done. I'll give you guys a look at some of my base settings in the radio. Okay, I got my radio on, planes on. Right now I have the ailerons going up and down 20 millimeters, and I have triple rates set up if I need to tone that down. The flaps are mixed in about 30%, flap to aileron mix. And I'll show you my thermal settings. This is my first thermal setting, which is about, I'd say about 3 millimeters of camber across the whole wing, and some snap flap mixed in. And then I have a second thermal setting here, which is about 5 millimeters of camber across the whole wing, with a lot less snap flap mixed in. And then I have a reflex or speed setting, which is about 2 to 3 millimeters of reflex. I'm getting quite adequate full flap down. And I'm running, which I've started doing a couple years ago, I'm running slight camber on the ailerons when I pull my flaps. So when I pull my flaps all the way down, I get probably 5 millimeters of camber on my ailerons. I stopped using crow or ailerons up on landing because I felt it just made the model a little less controllable, and made the aileron and rudder inputs in the landing pattern a little less precise. And I think with camber down, it still slows down dramatically, but the tips are generating more lift at a lower airspeed, so you get a little more controllability and precision in landing patterns. The elevator is pretty basic. Basically, just as much up and down as I could get, and a lot of rudder, and some rudder to aileron mixing. All this stuff needs to be tuned. This is just a base setting, so I'll fly it and start dialing in the settings from there. I have no differential in my ailerons at all, 0. And I like to start this way and play around with rudder mixing and then differential to get the plane to fly the way I like it. I don't just put differential in it on the bench, you know, like a lot of guys do. I just go up and down the same amount and then tune in the differential or rudder mixing as I see fit. But yeah, that's basically it. So she's pretty much ready to fly. I'm going to put the watt meter on the motor and see what kind of numbers I get. And hopefully when we come back, you might see some flying footage. Alright, I'm out at the park and I have the Infinity ready to fly. Did some tests with the props, and the 12.7 prop was pulling about 20 amps consistently and peaked at 25 initially. And the 13.7 peaked at 30 amps and was pulling 25 amps consistently. So I think they're both good to use. I have the 12.7 on here right now to start. And I'm just going to do a range check and give this sucker a couple hand tosses. Alright, well, got a few small flights on the Infinity. First impressions, the 2S setup is pretty weak. It's pretty gusty and choppy here right now. So it's hard to say yay or nay on that yet. Definitely tail heavy. I put a few grams of lead in the nose, but I think I got to get back on the bench and figure out exactly where I'm at and try to get the CG to about 120. Seems to be real light and floaty. Again, it's really hard to tell today because the conditions are real choppy and breezy, so I'm going to put it back on the bench and make a few more tweaks and try it again maybe really early in the morning when the weather is nice and calm. So it's going to wrap it up for the build series on the Infinity. If I do any more tuning or tweaking, I'll make another video, and I'll maybe make another video giving my final thoughts. So see you guys later.